Hello. Let's watch John make repairs to the rear valance and trunk floor.
So we're back on the passenger rear section. This was that part of the trunk plate that was bent to hell that I found the hard way. And then remember that flange, this flange right here was supposed to be 90 degrees and it was at some goofy angle. And to make things easier to get to back here, I just cut off this piece of the rear valance. So it kind of went like that, which is okay because I needed to bang out a bunch of bad dents and stuff in here. But here's the interesting thing that I found, is this edge. So this is the edge in the factory where the quarter panel meets the valance. And the valance, if we turn it over, is jogged. All right? So this flange right here with all the holes, and by the way, that is how many holes we're holding the fender or the rear quarter panel to this little piece. So anyways, this kind of silver part here that you see, the thickness of my finger, that's jogged, right? Meaning it comes over, down, and over, right? So that the fender quarter panel sits in it and then is flush. And then apparently what they do, and this could just be what the last bunch of knuckleheads did, but they lead that seam and then make it all nice and beautiful. So what I've done is I've gone through and drilled out all those rivets, and you can see, hopefully, I can't see from that view, some of it is broken away, okay? But you can kind of see lead there, that different silver color. And then this is the rest of the quarter panel that I need to pry away from this flange. All right, so that's what I'm doing now. When I get done with that, we'll revisit this part. I'll probably clean up this flange to make it look nice and get a better idea of what we're looking at. Because this actually needs to go back into place here before I can finish up the that plate that comes back here, and that follows this curve here as a plate that I fixed on the other side. And then I got to put a flange here to mount to that plate, and then there's another piece on top that I had to fabricate that you might remember, and it actually mounts to the top here. So that'll be a weld all along here. And then I can call this corner done, which ironically I was working on a long time ago, like a month. And then I realized the hard way that this had all been damaged in some accident, and everything got pushed down towards the camera, like 3/4 of an inch. So that kind of diverted what the hell I was working on, but we'll get back to that point and then kind of button up the car. All right, so I've been trying to delicately remove this piece of rotted old quarter panel, leaving this flange. But it's so flimsy through here because there's so many holes that had to be drilled to get to the rivets, that what I'm gonna do is just come in maybe 1/4 inch. That edge, the difference between the silver and the brown here, that is where the joggle is, okay? And remember, I have my nifty joggling tool, which I can't find right now. So what I'm going to do is cut it maybe 1/4 inch away from the joggle, and then just weld in a flange, yay wide, and then joggle it with that tool and reproduce what is here, or was here, sorry. So this piece is deceptively complicated. I mean, nothing that we can't deal with, but just pointing out, because I looked at or thought about replacing the whole rear valance because it's kind of bunged up all along the edge, and certainly where it goes around the exhaust pipe, it's really bunged up. So, but I just want to point out, this is the edge where the quarter panel is. This is where I cut it off, so kind of where the bumper mount is. But it's got this bend here, okay, which is at an angle. It's not parallel to the top or anything. And then it comes down and flanges here about 30 degrees or so. But since we're at the part where it's blending into the quarter panel, it goes from that bend, and then that bend just goes away, and then you just have a smooth radius here, but then you still have a straight section here, right, with that little corner there. So it's radius, corner, and then flat. So I'm gonna do the tape thing, build up a bunch of layers. I'll show you the steps through that, and then when I lay that flat, it'll give me the piece that I need to weld in here. All right, tape is applied, and I've marked it to show what's going on. So I've cut it exactly to the edge of the metal. This line here is where that jog is, jog edge. You can see I've traced where that corner is, and similarly where this corner tapers out into this area here, smooths out and goes away. And then I've marked with a dotted edge roughly where I'm going to cut this. I'm going to smooth out this cut. I don't need to make it kind of funky and come up and jog and go over. It'll just be a smoother piece of metal all the way down, and then that'll make it easier for welding in. So that's next step, is to cut the piece of metal. It'll just be a strip of metal about this big, and then we'll weld that in here. And I'm actually going to make it longer than I need, probably a lot longer, like out to here. And the reason I'm doing that is because I don't really trust this edge, plus I don't trust the edge of the quarter panel that I got from Rimmer's. And if all of a sudden I get this welded in and I put the quarter panel up and there's a gap, I'll just be really sad. So I don't want to account for that. I'll make this longer than I need. I won't put the joggle in yet. I'll put the quarter panel up, I'll trace the edges, then I'll put the jog in, and take it from there. And that way I know everything's going to fit and be wonderful. Here's my tape laid flat, losing its stick. Gave myself a 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch on each end here. I've marked where the bends are. There's the one on the bottom, that's that one at the top. But really at this point it kind of goes away because it's blending into the fender quarter panel, which doesn't have this bend in it, or this bend. This is the real end of the part, the EOP. But I said I'm going to give myself a bunch, and then I'll just trim it off once I know how the quarter panel is going to come into this thing. So next step. Oh, by the way, as far as cutting it, the only one edge that really needs to be accurate is this edge, right? Because that's the one that we're going to weld to the old part here. So that's this edge. So you want that cut to be accurate. The others can be whatever the hell. Here we go. All right, so far she's looking great. Got a perfect fit here. I just have to put this bend in here to pull this flat area here. This is flat. Tangent to this area here. And I'm just going to use this guy. You've seen me use that in the past, but I'll put that the center line of the bend parallel to the center line of this, and I'll just tap it until I get something that works. Here we go. All right, so we're back at the car. That's on its side. I've got this part. It goes here. This is where I cut it off so I could access everything better. So what I'll do is weld this guy back on. And what's interesting, well, not interesting, but so all these holes, they weld to this, and so that will help correctly position this tray, so to speak, which was the one that was all banged to hell and bent. So I've straightened it up, and I can use those holes to make sure it's positioned correctly. So that will go back together. And then I can actually maybe, well, again, I can finish up the little bits of sheet metal up here. And then that'll be buttoned up. All right, so this piece is in. It's been plug welded along here. That's where I cut it. So it's, again, semi-ground until I sandblast, and then every weld gets revisited and reground and smoothed out and beautiful. So yeah, found that, lined this up, this panel that was all bent to hell, so that's all good. And we're good. So I'm gonna rotate the car and then weld on the top of this. You'll remember that when we get the car turned over and you can see.
Good job. Time to get back to working on the trunk flow sheet metal.
All right, so just to catch people up, a long time ago, probably a month, I don't know, I was in the process of trying to replace this flat plate that my thumb is on. And because it was all rotted out, I did it on the other side. Well, one thing led to another, and so the silver piece that you see clamped on the top of that was all rotted out. Well, that silver piece is the 90-degree flange from this piece of the rear panel that we just fixed and welded back in place. So it joins along this top edge at a 90 degree. Again, that is one piece in the real world. And then that flange that I'm clamping to is what got welded. That's where the weld line was for this piece, this flat plate here. So that's where I was when I found all the body was all banged in and dented and had to get straightened out and everything. So one thing led to another. Well, we're back. So first thing I'm going to do is weld that little silver flange back where it belongs. And then I will plug weld the plate, this elliptical plate here, in place. So we're actually back to where I was before all hell broke loose. All right, so there's that flange welded on the top. I will weld it on the underneath also, but I gotta make sure I leave clearance in the corner for this plate to butt up in there. Other than that, yeah, things are proceeding. Okay, so you see this little flange here? It's supposed to be one here also. So let's go ahead and make that. I've taken the plate that I made in here that has that exact shape and used that to create a simple pattern. So using this plate, my flange is, looks like this. And then there'll be plug weld, something like that. So let's trace that onto my panel, and cut it out and weld it in. All right, there's that little flange installed. So we can move on and install this this plate, that goes in here. So let's get to that. I guess I'm going to plug weld it from the top down, which means I'll drill holes into this piece. And I guess I'll be drilling holes into that. So that's the next step. Alright, quick change of plans. I had to put the holes in this, so I'll plug weld it from underneath because it's just so hard to get a drill in here. I just don't have the room, and I don't have one of those little 90-degree drill attachments. So I put the holes in here, so I'll plug weld that from the bottom, and I'll plug weld this plate from the bottom, so this will fit under that flange. Kind of keys up in there, and then I'm gonna, so anyways, that's how it goes. Next step, plug welds. All right, there she is, plug welded in. So this is a big step because this is kind of where I was like a month ago when I was just trying to fit the quarter panel and realized that all this trunk panel was bent down and all that craziness happened. So I'm finally moving beyond that. So this is a good thing. It's just a view from the top, showing this installation all done. Obviously, I need to clean up the welds, no problems. But this panel's straight. This is all new, good metal now. We're happy. This is actually perfect. It's supposed to be 2.5 from the top of this piece to the bottom of this piece, and it is exactly that. So we're happy about that. So moving around the car, the next thing I'm going to take care of is this side of the transmission tunnel. There's a good chunk of rot that I cut out here, and plus that was a relief cut I put in to get it to twist and go back into place correctly. Yes, folks, I just couldn't stand it. I had to put the panel on and see how it's going to fit up in here, and it fits marvelously. Now I know what's going on with, why I gave myself extra on this piece. You saw me weld that on. So now I know where to make my lines and do my cuts, but it's fitting really good all through here. So this is all good and nice. The wheel well is mating actually really well, so that's a good thing. And then the front, I can't get it into place yet until I put in that chunk of flange that I cut off the donor car that goes in here, and then I can trim off this front flange of the quarter panel, and then it'll all just fit nice and smooth and beautiful. So I'm giving this overall a pretty good rating.
Thanks, guys. We appreciate you joining us on this adventure.